welcome to I Love This Thing So Fricking Much, a podcast about passion. My name is Sophie Katz, and today I am joined by Mystic Twilight, mental health advocate by day and whimsy fae by night. Welcome to the show, Myst.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, here's how this works. Myst will have 3 minutes to talk about something that she loves. This can be a person, place, thing, concept, activity, anything she wants. Our only requirement is that she loves it wholeheartedly and wants to tell us why. Are you ready, Myst?
I'm ready.
Good. Got my timer here. Now, what do you love so freaking much?
What I love so freaking much is storytelling. I honestly cannot think. It's weird to say that I'm thinking of art, but I am thankful to it because storytelling came to me very late in the game and everything in terms of like cosplaying and, all that sort of things because I came from a very bad situation prior. So at that time, I was rebuilding myself. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. So try finding yourself when you're locked indoors. So I ran to TikTok like a lot of other people. And I just happened to find my tribe, I would like to say, and that was within the storytelling community. And I never knew how much I loved the art. I loved always coming up with these characters and their backgrounds because I like exploring them being in certain situations and just kind of having them work through it. And sometimes it can be dark, sometimes it can be really whimsy and lighthearted. It just really depends on the muse and what inspiration strikes at that moment. But those are the stories that I love the most because through those, I noticed that some of those characters are dealing with certain elements that I might have dealt with at certain points in my life. Like one of my characters, it helped me get through a lot when the passing of my father. The character I created, she was also, dealing with a lot of stuff with her father. So, and at the time, I didn't really think of it as something that was really parallel to me despite my situation. It was just like, oh, I'm just writing a story. And then so much just got worked out. Granted, it might not have been the most lightest story, but it was something that just to see the character grow through it was a motivation for me to also get through, certain things. So that's something I can honestly say with a lot of my different characters. I've met so many beautiful and talented people and everything during my journey. And honestly, my best and closest friends to this day. So that's another thing that, storytelling has brought me closer to. And then being a diverse part of the OC community, the storytelling community, the cosplay community, because when I was younger, representation, it wasn't something I always got to see growing up. And, I didn't really get to see the fairies that look like me or the princesses. And it's so heartwarming to see so much of the change in the world and in media so much. Just to be a part of it, I definitely want to continue going forward and telling these stories because even if I touch one person, that means the world. Like just always thinking about what would I need when I was younger and
Go
storytelling.
ahead and finish your thought.
And storytelling pretty much brought me to that, and I'm thankful.
That's wonderful. Thank you for telling us about storytelling through cosplay today.
Thank you.
So let's start by taking a step back, because you mentioned a few key parts of your kind of storytelling, that it's on TikTok, that there's cosplay, that there's a certain amount of community and interactivity involved. Let's take a step back. How would you explain this storytelling process or the storytelling art form to people who have never interacted with it before?
So a lot of tags on TikTok, they are open sandboxes. I mean, it's really just paying attention to the captions and whether you see if it's a closed tag or an open tag. And then when it's open, that's an open sandbox. So it's nothing to just take what you have in a closet and just throw together a character and create a story. I mean, granted, try to stay in the guidelines of the tag if you can, but it's nothing to just kind of get involved. And the more you get involved, the more you can meet other people and duet and create content with them and then also potentially make friends along the way.
So everyone brings their individual characters to this sandbox, to this story world, and you just tell bits of it together?
Yeah. And then sometimes one idea, one audio that, we might duet together. Sometimes that light bulb just goes off and then another story just takes form in itself, like a little side quest for characters. And then that's ultimately how one builds their own character story.
Do you remember what was the first story on TikTok that caught your attention that made you think, I know how I want to take part in this?
Oh, yes. So definitely, I've loved the Greek mythology cosplays on TikTok because in school, growing up, I always had a deep interest in mythology, astrology, stars, solar systems. So just when I started seeing that content and seeing different takes about how the gods and goddesses interacted with each other and, different pieces of their story that I know, but a person didn't touch on. And I'm like, oh, I actually want to try this. So honestly, it was Greek mythology talk that started me, and then the rest just kind of snowballed.
I think it's interesting that Greek mythology, that storyline is what caught your attention first, because this kind of storytelling is performative. It's kind of an oral storytelling, and that's where all these myths initially were. They were the stories that people told to each other and created together in ancient times, all the way through to today.
Really that is what storytelling is. It starts from word of mouth, then sometimes it gets to pen to paper, and now we just have these platforms and these tools now that we can take it to media form, and it's just been so incredible to see.
And you mentioned that there's a personal investment in these stories. That you talked about having characters working through situations helps you work through complicated situations and problems in your own life. But you also mentioned this, I found this very interesting, is that this was in many ways unintentional. You didn't realize until you were already doing it that your character was going through something that you personally needed to work on. Could you talk a little more about that?
Of course, because when we all create OC characters, they are unintentionally like pieces of ourselves, regardless of what element we think we bring to the table. At that time, I personally was just kind of like, oh, well, this is just a character. And it was a character that I initially was starting to build. And then the feelings just happened to go into that muse at the time. So that's really what kind of made it snowball into something else. And it was more of like a healing process. What I noticed with a lot of other friends and OC creators that I've spoke with before in the past that, sometimes different emotions do get involved. So, you just got to be mindful of things like character bleeding and especially if working with others. But definitely, pay homage to those characters that are a source of healing for you because maybe it's a character that you might need to pull away from others, it's a character that you really have to devote to yourself and things of that nature. So it really just depends on like the emotions of it.
It seems a very natural thing for people to invest in stories. For some people, stories are escapism, but in other ways, stories do reflect the world around us. And so that must be an even more powerful effect to not only be hearing and watching the story from other people, but actively stepping forward as a character in the story and taking part in these situations yourself.
Yeah. Honestly, it sneaks up on you. That's the weirdest way I can say it because it's like you never really know what you're doing until like you're really just in the middle of it.
Sounds a bit improvisational.
Yeah, like especially with acting, because I am very late to theater. So I initially never thought that OC storytelling would actually open the door to be like, hey, you might want to try acting. But because of a lot of the improv, a lot of the camera work, and all the acting that goes into storytelling itself, with new media, everybody who was on TikTok in the storytelling community, they are an actor or actress in a way because, we are doing the same thing that we would see on, like in a movie or television. It's just a slow growing process. So that's another thing why I'm definitely trying to get more into it because I want to help encourage others if that's that path that they want to take, but also just to see how far it goes.
It certainly sounds like there's a lot you can learn about the production process in any of the film or television or even stage theater industries. From normally in these industries, you'd have a whole team working on the person running the camera, a person handling costumes, person handling lighting. But when it's you for a TikTok video, it's just you. You have to learn how all these things work, which I can only imagine opens the door to learn about all kinds of things as a performer.
You're absolutely right. You are a one-man team, 100%. So it definitely takes a lot of spoons because you're the director, you're the camera person, the sound, the lighting, all of that. So it's definitely a really amazing experience because, like, when you think about it, it's like, wow, I've done it too.
And at the same time, it's a one person production, but you've also talked a lot about the community that you found. Let's talk a little more about that.
With everybody else during the pandemic, TikTok was a outlet for some, just to kind of find like-minded people, people who just had the same interests and passions. So again, like it was never expected. I just went on thinking like, oh, well, I just want to kind of see. And then initially that's when I started to see others because I'm older. I'm in my like started cosplay late, like late 20s. And at that time, you have real life and people saying, that's childish or that's this, that's that. So you kind of tuck it away. But when I started to see others who were in my age group and they're actually talking about the costumes and going to cons, that initially opened the door. And then started with my first group. It was Final Fantasy Friends. And that's where I met one of my best friends. And then we just was like, hey, let's start a storytelling tag. And then that was the end of everything. Well, ending and beginning of everything.
Is there anything that you don't like about storytelling through cosplay? And if so, how do you handle that?
Anything that I don't like?
Yep.
Probably it would have to be imposter syndrome because we are all very talented individuals, like 100%. Like, I love a lot of content and everything, but creators don't get the recognition that they deserve. So imposter syndrome is something that definitely plagues us all. And that's the one thing I don't like because it definitely puts you in the mindset that you're not good enough when you 100% are good enough.
So how do you handle that?
It's always great to check in with friends. I always have those conversations with everybody. And I notice that sometimes it isn't always me who'll come into, like, we have a lot of platforms. A lot of us congregate on Discord. I can see like-minded creators saying the same thing, like, oh, I'm having imposter syndrome, or oh, I'm just having a bad brain day. So actually talking about it, but also seeing that you're not alone is really helpful because I think that is just part of the starving artist syndrome, I like to call it sometimes, because, as an artist, you do have those highs and lows. And it's just surrounding yourself with people who will help you and remind you of what you're capable of is always helpful. And sometimes just taking a step back to remind yourself.
Yeah, it all goes back to that community thing we've been talking about, where there's this stereotype of the lone genius artist alone in their room making this brilliant thing. But the best and happiest art comes from when you have a group of people you're working with and can connect to.
Absolutely. In my perspective, I honestly think those are the most memorable experiences I've had so far as a storyteller. And I've been doing this on TikTok for 4 years now. So those are the ones that truly stand out, or the stories that I've created with other individuals, or even stories that were initially starting their characters and just being a part of. It's that element, that bond, and it's always so much fun.
Myst, thank you so much for telling us about something you love today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to tell you guys about it.
And thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today. If you would like to learn more about storytelling through cosplay or our guest, Mystic Twilight, you can find her social media information in the episode description. And if you have something you love so freaking much you want to tell me all about it, consider this your invitation to join the show. I Love This Thing So Freaking Much is a production of Through the Window Media. This episode was directed and edited by Sophie A. Katz. You can find us at Through the Window on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or Tumblr. That is THROU the Window at all those social media sites. Be good to yourself, be kind to each other, and you'll hear from us again soon.